St. Augustine Medical Center stood as a beacon of hope in the heart of the city, its towering glass facade reflecting the soft amber glow of a late autumn evening, while inside its halls hummed with the quiet rhythm of life and healing. In the pediatric wing on the third floor, the air was thick with the scent of antiseptic and the gentle beeping of monitors, a soothing backdrop to the murmured conversations of nurses gliding through their rounds and families huddled in waiting rooms, their faces etched with worry and love. In room 208, 6-year-old Lily Harper sat upright in her hospital bed, her dark curls spilling over the pale blue gown that hung loosely on her small frame, her hazel eyes sharp with a clarity that seemed to cut through the sterile air around her. Her father, Michael Harper, a 42-year-old CEO of the hospital chain, stood by her bedside. His tailored suit, creased from hours spent in the same chair, his broad shoulders slumped under the weight of grief and responsibility that had defined his life for the past 6 months. Since his wife Anna succumbed to a rare autoimmune disease that no amount of wealth or medical expertise could halt, Michael had been navigating a world that felt hollow without her. His days a blur of board meetings, budget reviews, and the relentless fear that his only child Lily might be slipping away too. Lily had been hospitalized for weeks, her chart a growing puzzle of vague symptoms, intermittent fevers, fatigue, and occasional dizziness that baffled even the most seasoned doctors in AA. Michael's employ leaving him to wrestle with the terror of history repeating itself. Yet tonight, Lily's gaze held an urgency that tugged at his heart, pulling him from his spiraling thoughts about the latest lab results, which showed another unexplained fever and a troubling dip in her blood work. "Daddy, I need to tell you something," she whispered, her voice small but steady, her tiny hand clutching his sleeve with a strength that belied the frail patient described in her medical records. Michael leaned closer, his brow furrowing as he brushed a curl from her forehead. His deep voice soft but distracted his mind, still half on the conversation he'd had earlier with Emily Carter, his girlfriend of 4 months who had become a lifeline in the chaos of grief and single parenthood. Emily, a former PR manager for the hospital, knew its systems inside out, her calm efficiency and warm smiles, easing the burden of coordinating Lily's care from scheduling specialist consults to ensuring Michael ate between endless meetings. She had stepped into their lives with a grace that felt like a gift, her presence a steady anchor. When Michael felt adrift, her knowledge of hospital protocols a comfort as he grappled with decisions no parent should face. But Lily's next words cut through his thoughts like a blade, her eyes darting to the closed door of her room before locking onto his with a fierce intensity that made his breath catch. "I'm not sick, Daddy. I heard Emily talking to Nurse Wells last night. She gave her an envelope and told her to write down that I had a fever. When I didn't, I saw it all." The words landed like a punch, Michael's heart torn between disbelief and a creeping dread that his daughter's clear, steady voice might hold a truth he wasn't ready to face. He wanted to dismiss it as the imagination of a 6-year-old bored and scared in a hospital bed, her mind weaving stories to make sense of the endless tests and needles. But the memory of Lily's crayon drawings, always so precise and honest, flashed in his mind. Pictures of their old house with Anna in the garden or the hospital room, with every detail of the monitors and IV lines captured in waxy colors. Lily's small hand tightened on his sleeve, her eyes pleading for him to listen her certainty, clashing with the image of Emily's tireless support, the way she'd stayed late to review Lily's chart with doctors or brought Lily her favorite stuffed bunny to make the hospital feel less cold. Michael's chest tightened as he thought of Anna. How she'd always said Lily had a gift for seeing things others missed, a clarity that cut through the complications adults built around themselves. He remembered the nights he and Anna had spent. In this very hospital during her final months, Lily curled up between them reading picture books, her laughter a fleeting light in the darkness. Now as he looked at his daughter, really looked, he saw no trace of the feverish lethargy described in her chart. Her cheeks were pink with health, her movements quick and sure as she sat up straighter to make her point. Had he been too quick to trust Emily, too desperate for someone to share the weight of his loss? The room seemed to shrink around them, the beeping monitors fading into a distant hum as Michael's world narrowed to his daughter's face, the weight of her words settling like a stone in his stomach. He thought of the moments he'd almost missed in his grief, the way Lily had started drawing more since Anna's death, her pictures a silent language he hadn't fully listened to until now. What if she was right? What if Emily, the woman he'd let into their lives, was hiding something sinister behind her polished exterior? The idea felt like a betrayal, not just of his trust, but of Anna's memory, as if he'd failed to protect the one piece of her he had left. Michael's hand trembled slightly as he reached for Lily's chart on the bedside table, flipping it open to the latest entry, a scrawled note from Nurse Wells documenting a fever spike at midnight. But he'd touched Lily's forehead. Just an hour ago it had been cool, normal, not the burning heat the records claimed. "Daddy, do you believe me?" Lily asked, her voice smaller now, a flicker of doubt creeping in, as if she feared her truth might be too big for him to hold. Michael's heart ached at the thought of her carrying this secret alone, watching and listening in a hospital room that should have been her sanctuary. He wanted to promise her everything was fine, to shield her from the fear in her own words. But the clarity in her eyes demanded more. It demanded truth. "I'm listening, sweetheart," he said, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. "Tell me everything you saw." As Lily began to recount the details, her small voice painting a vivid picture of Emily's whispered conversation with Nurse Wells in the dim hallway, Michael felt the ground shift beneath him. The hospital, his place of power and control, suddenly felt like a maze of shadows, where the smallest voice might hold the key to a truth he'd been too blind to see. Michael Harper stood frozen in Lily's hospital room at St. Augustine Medical Center, the sterile hum of the pediatric wing pressing against his ears as his daughter's words echoed in his mind, her accusation against Emily Carter, a jagged splinter lodged in his thoughts. Lily's small voice had been unwavering, her hazel eyes wide with conviction, as she described overhearing Emily bribe Nurse Wells to falsify her fever readings, a claim so bold it threatened to unravel the fragile trust Michael had built with the woman who had become his anchor in the 6 months since Anna's death. He wanted to dismiss it as a child's misunderstanding, a story spun from the monotony of hospital life, but the clarity in Lily's gaze, the way she clutched her stuffed bunny as she spoke, made his stomach twist with a dread he couldn't shake. He paced the room, his polished shoes clicking softly on the linoleum, his mind racing to reconcile the image of Emily, her warm smiles, her meticulous notes on Lily's care, with the sinister possibility his 6-year-old had laid bare. Michael thought of the late nights Emily had spent by his side, reviewing specialist reports, her hand resting gently on his arm, as she assured him they'd find answers for Lily's mysterious symptoms. Could someone so devoted, so seemingly selfless, be capable of such deception? He stopped by Lily's bedside, where she now sat quietly coloring in a notebook, her small hands moving with purpose as she sketched the scene she'd witnessed. Emily, handing Nurse Wells an envelope in the dim hallway outside her room. Michael's heart clenched at the detail, in her drawing the careful lines of Emily's sleek ponytail, the nurse's hesitant posture, the envelope marked with a dollar sign in Lily's bold crayon strokes. He knelt beside her, his voice gentle but firm. "Show me exactly what you drew, sweetheart. Let's go through it together." Lily flipped open the notebook, pointing to the figures with a seriousness that made her seem older than her years, her explanation precise. She'd woken up thirsty, heard whispers, and peeked through the crack in her door to see Emily's hushed transaction. Michael's mind flashed to the medical chart he'd glanced at earlier, its pages filled with Nurse Wells's notes about fevers and fatigue that didn't match the vibrant child before him. He pulled the chart from the bedside table, his fingers trembling as he scanned the entries, noting the stark contrast between Nurse Wells's recent logs and those of Clara Thompson, a veteran nurse who'd been inexplicably reassigned from Lily's care a week ago. Clara's notes described Lily as alert with normal vitals, while Wells's painted a picture of a declining patient needing urgent escalation. The discrepancy gnawed at him, a thread of doubt pulling tighter with each line he read. Michael's thoughts drifted to Anna, how she'd always trusted Lily's instincts, marveling at their daughter's ability to notice details others overlooked, like the time Lily had pointed out a tiny crack in their living room window that Anna swore she'd never have seen. That memory now felt like a warning, a reminder that ignoring Lily's words could be a betrayal of the promise he'd made to Anna to always protect their daughter. He kissed Lily's forehead, whispering, You're so brave for telling me this. I need to check something, but I'll be right back, okay? Lily nodded, her eyes bright with hope, but shadowed with fear, as if she sensed the weight of what she'd set in motion. Michael stepped into the hallway, his CEO demeanor masking the storm in his chest as he approached the nurse's station, his gaze locking on the night supervisor, a young woman he didn't recognize. "Where's Clara Thompson tonight?" he asked, his tone clipped but controlled. The supervisor hesitated, her fingers pausing over her keyboard. Clara was moved to the oncology wing last week. Something about scheduling conflicts. Michael's jaw tightened. Scheduling conflicts for a nurse who'd worked pediatrics for 20 years. He made a mental note to dig into that later, his instincts screaming that Clara's absence was no coincidence. Instead, he requested access to the hospital's security footage, his authority as CEO granting him immediate compliance. Though the security guard, James, raised an eyebrow at the unusual request. In the dimly lit security office, Michael watched grainy footage from the pediatric wing's hallway, his heart pounding as he spotted Emily at 11:52 p.m. 2 nights ago, her sleek figure unmistakable as she spoke to Nurse Wells, her movements quick and secretive. The footage showed no envelope, but the interaction was too brief, too deliberate to be casual, and Wells' nervous glance down the hall before returning to her computer sent a chill through him. Michael's mind raced back to Emily's insistence on escalating Lily's treatment, her suggestions of experimental therapies, and her gentle nudging about a medical power of attorney to ensure Lily's care if Michael was ever unavailable. At the time, it had seemed practical, a safeguard born of care, but now it felt like a trap, a calculated step in a plan he couldn't yet fully grasp. He thought of the trust fund Anna had left for Lily, a substantial sum meant for her future, secured against frivolous use, but accessible for medical emergencies, a detail Emily knew from their late-night talks about finances. The possibility that Emily was orchestrating a scheme for profit made his blood run cold, but the idea that she'd target Lily, a child she claimed to care for, felt like a knife to his heart. Michael returned to Lily's room, his steps heavier. Now as he sat beside her, watching her color with fierce concentration, her small world contained in the lines of her drawing. He thought of the moments he'd leaned on Emily, her calm voice soothing his fears, her promises that they'd get through. This together, and he wondered how much of it had been a lie. Lily looked up, sensing his turmoil, her voice soft but clear. "Daddy, you believe me, don't you?" Michael's throat tightened, the weight of her trust pressing against the guilt of his own blindness. "I believe you, sweetheart," he said, his voice steady. "Despite the chaos in his mind, we're going to figure this out together, I promise." But as he spoke, a part of him feared what he'd uncover, the truth behind Emily's actions and the cost of his own failure to see it sooner. Lily's hand slipped into his, her small fingers warm and trusting, and Michael felt a surge of resolve. He'd failed to save Anna, but he wouldn't fail their daughter. He needed answers, and he needed them now before Emily's next move put Lily in greater danger. The hospital, once his domain of control, now felt like a labyrinth of secrets, and he was determined to follow Lily's truth wherever it led. Michael Harper's resolve hardened as he left the security office of St. Augustine Medical Center, the grainy footage of Emily Carter's late-night meeting with Nurse Wells looping in his mind like a warning siren, fueling a fire of determination to protect his daughter Lily from whatever scheme was unfolding. He navigated the hospital's bustling corridors, his CEO presence commanding quick nods from staff, but his thoughts were solely on Lily's accusation and the chilling possibility that Emily, his trusted partner of 4 months, was orchestrating a deception that targeted his 6-year-old daughter. The hospital's fluorescent lights seemed harsher now, casting long shadows, as Michael made his way to the administrative wing, where he could access records without drawing attention. He needed evidence, something concrete to confirm or refute. Lily's claim that Emily had bribed Nurse Wells to falsify her medical records, a claim that threatened to unravel not just his trust in Emily, but the fragile stability he'd clung to since Anna's death. His first stop was Clara Thompson, the veteran nurse who had been reassigned from Lily's care. Under suspicious circumstances, her absence from the pediatric wing, a puzzle piece that didn't fit. Michael found Clara in the oncology ward, her kind, eyes lighting up with surprise when she saw him, her graying hair tucked neatly under her scrub cap. "Mr. Harper," she said, her voice warm but cautious. "What brings you here so late?" Michael didn't waste time explaining Lily's accusation in a low, urgent tone, watching Clara's expression shift from confusion to concern, her lips pressing into a thin line as she processed the implications. She agreed to meet him in a quiet conference room, pulling up Lily's digital records on a secure laptop, her fingers moving with the efficiency of someone who'd navigated the hospital's system for decades. Together they pored over the entries, Clara pointing out the stark inconsistencies between her own logs from 2 weeks ago, which noted Lily's stable vitals and bright demeanor, and Nurse Wells' recent reports of escalating symptoms like high fevers and disorientation that seemed to appear overnight. Clara shook her head, her voice tight with anger. "I knew something wasn't right when they moved me to oncology. I've cared for Lily since she was admitted, and she was never as sick as these new notes claim." Michael's heart sank, the evidence mounting but still circumstantial. He needed more to confront Emily without risking Lily's safety. As Clara printed out the conflicting records, Michael's phone buzzed with a message from James, the security guard who'd helped him earlier, mentioning an elderly patient, Henry Grayson, who'd been asking to speak with him about unusual activity on the pediatric floor. Intrigued and desperate for any lead, Michael met Henry in a quiet corner of the hospital cafeteria, the older man's sharp eyes and steady hands belying his frail frame and hospital gown. Henry, a retired private investigator with a knack for noticing details, introduced himself as a patient recovering from heart surgery. "His room just down the hall from Lily's. I couldn't help but over," he principled. He said, his voice low but firm. "I've seen your girlfriend Emily visiting late at night too often for it to be casual, and always with that Nurse Wells." Henry pulled out a small smartphone, its screen cracked but functional, and showed Michael a series of short videos he'd recorded from his doorway, grainy clips, capturing Emily's hushed conversations with Nurse Wells in the dead of night. One video, time-stamped 3 nights ago, showed Emily handing Wells a manila envelope, her posture tense and secretive, while Wells glanced nervously down the hall before tucking it away. They were talking about a transfer. Henry said, his tone grim, something about moving Lily to a private clinic where they could control her care better. Michael's blood ran cold, the word transfer, echoing Emily's recent suggestions that Lily needed specialized treatment at a facility called Willow Grove Wellness Center, a place she'd described as cutting-edge but expensive, perfect for complex cases like Lily's. He thanked Henry, who promised to send copies of the videos to a secure email, then returned to Clara, who had uncovered another clue, a series of unsigned orders in Lily's file requesting costly diagnostic tests that seemed unnecessary given Clara's observations of Lily's health. The orders were linked to Emily's hospital login, a detail that made Michael's stomach churn, as he realized her access as a former PR manager gave her just enough leverage to manipulate records without raising immediate alarms. He thought of the conversations where Emily had pushed for a medical power of attorney, framing it as a precaution in case he was ever incapacitated, her logic so reasonable at the time, but now dripping with ulterior motive. Michael's mind flashed to Lily's trust fund, a $2 million inheritance from Anna's life insurance, meant for her education and future, but accessible for medical emergencies, a fact Emily had learned during their late-night talks about financial planning. The pieces were falling into place, a scheme to inflate Lily's medical needs, siphon funds through unnecessary treatments, and possibly secure control over her trust fund through legal loopholes. He felt a surge of rage tempered by fear for Lily, who was still in her hospital room, vulnerable to Emily's next move. Michael asked Clara to keep their findings confidential and compile a detailed report of the discrepancies, promising to bring it to the hospital board if needed. As he left the conference room, his thoughts turned to Lily, her small, brave voice carrying a truth he'd almost dismissed her crayon, drawing a testament to her courage in a world that often overlooked children. He couldn't confront Emily yet, not without risking her escalating her plan, but he could protect Lily by ensuring she wasn't alone. He called the security office, requesting a trusted guard be stationed outside Lily's room under the guise of routine protocol, his voice steady, despite the panic clawing at his chest. Returning to Lily's room, he found her asleep, her notebook open to the drawing of Emily and Wells, the crayon lines a silent accusation that burned in his mind. He sat beside her, watching her chest rise and fall, her peaceful face a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding around her. Michael's guilt deepened. He'd leaned on Emily to fill the void Anna left, trusting her to help navigate Lily's care. But now he saw how his grief had blinded him to the danger lurking in her kindness. He whispered a promise to Lily's sleeping. "I'm going to make this right, sweetheart. No one will hurt you, I swear it." But as he sat there, the hospital's familiar walls felt like a tightening noose each beep of the monitor, a reminder that time was running out to stop Emily before her scheme went further. Michael Harper's heart pounded as he stood outside Lily's room at St. Augustine Medical Center, the hospital's quiet hum now a deafening roar in his ears as the weight of Emily Carter's deception bore down on him. The evidence he'd uncovered with Clara Thompson and Henry Grayson, discrepant medical records, late-night bribes captured on video, and Emily's push for a medical power of attorney, painted a chilling picture of a scheme to falsify Lily's condition for financial gain. But Michael knew he had to act carefully to protect his 6-year-old daughter from a woman he'd trusted with their lives. He'd stationed a security guard outside Lily's door the night before, a precaution he hoped would buy him time to gather enough proof to confront Emily and involve the authorities without endangering Lily. But as dawn broke over the city, casting pale light through the hospital windows, Michael's sense of control shattered when he arrived at the pediatric wing to find the guard missing, the nurse's station eerily quiet, and Lily's room 208 empty. The bed was unmade, its sheets tangled as if someone had left in a hurry. Lily's stuffed bunny abandoned on the pillow, her coloring book gone along with the damning drawing of Emily's bribe. Michael's chest tightened, a cold sweat prickling his skin as he flagged down a passing nurse, a young woman whose name tag read Sarah, her eyes widening at his urgency. "Where's my daughter, Lily Harper? Where's the patient from this room?" he demanded, his voice low but laced with a father's desperation. Sarah hesitated, checking her tablet, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through the system, her words halting. As she explained that Lily had been transferred at 5:30 a.m. to Willow Grove Wellness Center, a private clinic 40 minutes away, for emergency treatment authorized by a medical power of attorney holder, Emily Carter. Michael's world tilted, the words "power of attorney" slicing through him like a blade. He'd never signed any such document, never granted Emily authority over Lily's care. Sarah stammered, her face paling, as she showed him the digital paperwork, a scanned form bearing his signature, a forgery so convincing it mimicked the flourish of his own hand. Michael's mind raced. Emily had moved faster than he'd anticipated, escalating her plan to remove Lily from St. Augustine, where his influence as CEO could protect her, to a facility where her control would be absolute. He demanded to know who had cleared the transfer, learning that Nurse Wells had overseen the process, claiming Emily had presented the paperwork as a medical necessity, citing Lily's deteriorating condition. Michael's rage flared, but he forced himself to stay calm, calling his head of security, James, on his cell, his voice deadly precise as he ordered a lockdown of hospital exits and an immediate review of all surveillance footage from the pediatric wing between midnight and dawn. James confirmed the guard assigned to Lily's room had received a call at 4 a.m. from someone claiming to be Michael, redirecting him to the emergency department, a ruse that cleared the way for Emily's move. Michael's thoughts spiraled. To Lily, alone and scared in an unfamiliar place, her small voice silenced by adults who believed Emily's lies, his failure to act sooner, a heavy stone in his gut. He contacted Detective Laura Martinez, a no-nonsense officer he'd briefed the previous night about Emily's potential fraud, her sharp voice crackling through the phone as she promised to dispatch a team to Willow Grove and issue an alert for Lily's unlawful removal. Michael grabbed his coat and keys, refusing to wait, driving toward Willow Grove himself, the city's morning traffic a blur, as he replayed every moment he'd trusted Emily, her soothing words about Lily's care, her gentle nudging toward costly treatments, all part of a calculated betrayal. He thought of Anna, how she'd have fought tooth and nail for Lily, her fierce love a contrast to his own hesitation, his grief having dulled his instincts until Lily's courage forced him to see the truth. The drive felt endless, the highway stretching into a grey haze as Michael's mind churned with what he'd find at Willow Grove, a facility Emily had described as elite, but now loomed like a fortress designed to keep Lily from him. He called Clara Thompson en route, her voice steady as she confirmed she'd sent copies of the falsified records to Detective Martinez, adding that she'd overheard Nurse Wells on a call that morning, sounding panicked about the rushed transfer. Michael's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Realizing Emily's haste suggested she knew he was closing in her forged power of attorney, a desperate gamble to secure Lily before he could intervene. He thought of Henry Grayson's videos, the envelope changing hands, the whispered talk of a transfer, and wondered how deep Emily's network ran, whether others at Willow Grove were complicit in her plan to profit from Lily's trust fund or inflated insurance claims. The possibility that Emily had painted him as an unfit father to justify her actions gnawed at him, her recent comments about his stress and grief taking on a sinister edge, as if she'd been laying the groundwork to discredit him. Michael's guilt deepened he'd let Emily into their lives, invited her to fill the void Anna left, and now Lily was paying the price for his blindness. As he neared Willow Grove's sleek modern campus, its manicured lawns and glass entrance, a stark contrast to St. Augustine's urban sprawl, Michael steeled himself for the fight ahead. He parked and strode toward the entrance, his CEO authority replaced by a father's raw determination to bring his daughter home. Detective Martinez texted that she was 10 minutes out with a social worker and a warrant, but Michael couldn't wait, his every instinct screaming that Lily needed him now. He thought of her small hand in his the night before her, whispered, "I knew you'd believe me," a trust he'd almost betrayed, but now fueled his every step. Emily's betrayal had torn open old wounds, but it had also awakened a fierce clarity. Michael would stop at nothing to save Lily, no matter what lies or obstacles lay ahead. Michael Harper's boots echoed on the polished floors of Willow Grove Wellness Center, the private clinic's sleek lobby, a sterile contrast to the chaos roaring in his chest as he stormed toward the reception desk, his heart fixed on finding his 6-year-old daughter Lily. The weight of Emily Carter's betrayal, her forged power of attorney, the falsified medical records, and the rushed transfer of Lily from St. Augustine Medical Center propelled him forward each step, fueled by a father's desperation and the searing guilt of having trusted the woman who now held his daughter captive. The receptionist, a young man with a practiced smile, faltered under Michael's intense gaze, stammering that only authorized personnel could access patient areas, but Michael's CEO authority cut through the pleasantries, his voice sharp as he demanded to see Dr. Richardson, the physician Emily had named as overseeing Lily's care. Detective Laura Martinez was minutes away with a social worker and a warrant, but Michael couldn't wait the image of Lily's trusting hazel eyes and her brave accusation against Emily burning in his mind. A nurse escorted him to a secure wing where Dr. Richardson met him, a tall man in his 50s, with a calm demeanor that wavered when Michael introduced himself as Lily's father, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I never authorized any transfer or treatment. My daughter was taken here under false pretenses, and I want to see her now." Dr. Richardson's brow creased as he led Michael down a quiet hallway, explaining that Emily had presented a valid power of attorney, claiming Lily suffered from severe psychological trauma and delusions, including false beliefs about her health and her father's intentions. Michael's blood boiled the audacity of Emily's lies, twisting Lily's courage into a fabricated illness, but he held his composure, knowing every second mattered. They reached a small observation room, its one-way glass revealing Lily sitting in a child-sized chair, her dark curls framing a face pale with fear, her stuffed bunny nowhere in sight. Emily sat across from her, a clipboard in hand, her voice soft but insistent as she asked, "When did you start thinking your daddy wasn't helping you get better, sweetheart? It's okay to tell me about these feelings." Lily's small shoulders stiffened, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape, her voice barely audible as she said, "I'm not sick. I told Daddy the truth, and he's coming for me." Michael's heart shattered at the sight of his daughter, so small yet so resolute, fighting to be heard against Emily's calculated manipulation. Before Dr. Richardson could stop him, Michael pushed into the room, his presence filling the space. As Lily's face lit up with relief, her cry of "Daddy" breaking through the sterile silence. She leapt from her chair, running toward him, but Emily moved faster, her hand gentle but firm on Lily's shoulder as she said, "Lily, sweetheart, we talked about this sometimes when you're scared. You see things that aren't real. Your daddy isn't here right now." The words were a gut punch, Michael watching in horror as Emily tried to convince his daughter he was a hallucination, a tactic so cruel it stripped away any lingering doubt about her intentions. "I'm real, sweetheart. I'm here to take you home," he said, kneeling to Lily's level, his voice steady despite the rage clawing at his chest. Lily's eyes filled with tears, her small body trembling as she reached for him, but Emily's grip tightened, her expression a mask of false concern as she turned to Michael. "You're upsetting her. Daniel, she's in a fragile state. This could trigger a severe dissociative episode." Dr. Richardson hesitated, clearly torn, but before he could speak, Detective Martinez burst into the room, flanked by a social worker and 2 officers, her badge flashing. As she announced, "Emily Carter, you're under arrest for kidnapping, fraud, and child endangerment. Step away from the child now." Emily's composure cracked, her eyes darting between Michael and the officers as she clutched her clipboard like a shield, her voice rising with a mix of defiance and desperation. "You don't understand. I'm protecting her. Daniel's too unstable to make decisions for her after what happened to his wife. He can't see how sick she is." Michael scooped Lily into his arms, her small body clinging to him as she whispered, "I knew you'd come, Daddy. I told them I wasn't sick, but they wouldn't. Listen." He held her tight, his voice soft but firm. "I believe you, sweetheart. I'm so sorry I didn't listen sooner." Martinez stepped forward, handcuffs in hand, as she read Emily her rights. But Emily's gaze locked onto Michael, her voice dropping to a chilling calm. "You're making a mistake, Daniel. I saw Anna's medical records. I know you delayed her treatment. Questioned the doctors until it was too late. I couldn't let that happen to Lily." The accusation hit like a physical blow, Michael's grief for Anna raw and exposed, but Lily's voice cut through, clear and steady. "You're wrong. My mommy died because she was sick, not because Daddy did anything wrong." Her words, simple and unyielding, stripped Emily's justification bare, revealing a woman, consumed by her own distorted logic, a belief that she could save Lily from a tragedy she'd imagined Michael had caused. Emily's shoulders slumped her, eyes glistening with a mix of grief and defeat as she whispered, "I thought I was helping. I couldn't save Anna, but I could save her." Michael shook his head, his voice quiet but resolute. "Helping means listening to the truth even when it's hard, and you refuse to hear Lily's." As the officers led Emily away, her final glance at Lily was one of profound sadness, a woman unraveling under the weight of her own delusions. Dr. Richardson apologized profusely, promising a full investigation into how his facility had been misled, while the social worker checked on Lily, ensuring she was unharmed. But Michael's focus was solely on his daughter, her small hand in his anchoring him to the present. He carried her out of the room, her head resting on his shoulder, her soft "I love you, Daddy" a balm to the wounds of the past hours. As they stepped into the sunlight outside Willow Grove, Michael felt the weight of his failure to protect Lily sooner, but also the strength of her courage, a 6-year-old who'd faced lies and fear with a truth that saved her. Detective Martinez promised to follow up with charges against Emily and any accomplices, while Michael vowed to never again doubt the clarity of his daughter's voice. The late summer sun bathed the small garden behind St. Augustine Medical Center in a golden glow, its stone benches and vibrant flower beds a quiet haven where Michael Harper and his 6-year-old daughter Lily knelt together, their hands deep in the soft earth as they planted rows of marigolds and lavender. 3 weeks had passed since Michael had rescued Lily from Willow Grove Wellness Center, wrenching her from the grip of Emily Carter's chilling deception, a scheme that had nearly cost them everything, but instead forged an unbreakable bond between father and daughter rooted in the truth Lily's small voice had bravely uncovered. The garden, named Anna's Haven, was their tribute to Lily's late mother, whose love for flowers had filled their old backyard with color and whose memory now guided their healing. Michael watched Lily carefully place a marigold seedling in the soil, her dark curls bouncing as she worked her face alight with a confidence that had grown since the ordeal, her once tentative movements now sure and deliberate. He marveled at her resilience, how she'd emerged from the trauma of Emily's lies not with fear, but with a quiet strength, her hazel eyes reflecting a wisdom beyond her years. As they worked, Lily hummed a tune Anna used to sing her small voice, weaving through the rustle of leaves, a reminder of the love that still connected them to the woman they'd lost. Michael's heart swelled with gratitude for Lily's courage. Her unwavering insistence that she wasn't sick had shattered Emily's carefully constructed fraud, exposing a plan to exploit Lily's trust fund through fabricated medical crises. The aftermath had been swift. Emily faced charges of kidnapping, fraud, and child endangerment, her psychiatric evaluation revealing a grief-driven obsession with saving Lily from what she falsely believed was Michael's neglect, a delusion tied to her inability to accept Anna's death from an untreatable illness. Nurse Wells had lost her license and was cooperating with authorities to uncover any broader misconduct, while Dr. Richardson at Willow Grove pledged reforms to prevent such manipulations. Michael had reinstated Clara Thompson to the pediatric wing, where her warm presence reassured Lily, who now called her nurse grandma, her return a small victory in restoring the hospital's integrity. But it was Lily's idea, born as they planted Anna's haven, that gave Michael true hope, a set of rules she called the Children's Voice Rules, designed to ensure young patients were heard and believed. Sitting on the garden's stone bench, Lily had outlined her plan with a seriousness that made Michael's chest ache, her small hands gesturing, as she listed rules like every child gets to tell their story to two grown-ups, and no one can say a child's wrong just because they're young. Michael had taken her proposal to the hospital board, presenting it with Lily by his side. Her stuffed bunny clutched tightly as she spoke, her clear voice silencing the room's skepticism. The board approved the initiative, naming Lily the hospital's first junior advocate, a role she embraced with pride, her crayon-drawn poster of the rules now displayed in every pediatric ward. As they packed the soil around the lavender, Michael reflected on how Lily's ordeal had changed him. He'd been a man adrift after Anna's death, leaning on Emily's false comfort, but Lily's truth had forced him to confront his grief and reclaim his role as a father. He thought of the moments they'd shared since the rescue, quiet evenings, reading Anna's favorite books, laughter over Lily's silly jokes, and the way she'd started drawing again, her pictures now filled with bright gardens and smiling families. The garden itself was a testament to their renewal, its blooms a promise kept to Anna, who'd dreamed of planting with Lily when she was well. Michael's thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice calling his name. He looked up to see Henry Grayson, the retired investigator whose videos had helped expose Emily, approaching with a gentle smile, his recovery from heart surgery evident in his steady gait. Henry had become a regular at the hospital, volunteering with the Children's Advocacy Program, his sharp mind and kind heart a perfect fit for ensuring kids like Lily were protected. Lily ran to hug him, her joy infectious as she showed him the marigolds, proudly declaring they're for Mommy, because she loved yellow. Henry chuckled, handing her a small packet of daisy seeds, a gift for Anna's haven, his quiet, "I'm proud of you, young lady," making Lily beam. As Henry and Michael talked about the advocacy program's progress, Michael felt a deep sense of purpose. The hospital, once a place of control and power, was now a space for listening and healing, shaped by Lily's vision. They finished planting as the sun dipped low, the garden aglow with the promise of spring blooms, Lily dusting dirt from her hands as she announced her next idea. "I want to be the hospital's truth keeper, Daddy, to make sure everyone tells the truth, like I did." Michael laughed, his first unguarded joy in months kneeling to meet her eyes. "That's the best job I've ever heard, sweetheart, and you're already the best at it." They unveiled a wooden sign for Anna's haven, its carved words, "A place for truth and love," a tribute to Anna's spirit and Lily's courage. Lily tracing the letters with her finger as she sounded them out, her pride in reading them herself, a small triumph. As they sat on the bench watching the garden settle into dusk, Michael thought of the policy changes sweeping St. Augustine, new protocols for verifying medical orders, mandatory training on listening to pediatric patients, and a hotline for kids to report concerns, all inspired by Lily's rules. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Emily's trial loomed and the hospital faced scrutiny for its vulnerabilities, but with Lily by his side, Michael felt ready to face it all. Lily leaned against him, her small hand in his, as she said, "Daddy, I think Mommy's happy we made her garden. It's like she's still here with us." Michael kissed her forehead, his voice thick with emotion. "She's always with us, sweetheart, and so is your courage." The garden's quiet beauty wrapped around them, a testament to the truth that had saved them, and the love that would carry them forward, a father and daughter united by a 6-year-old's unwavering honesty in a world that had tried to silence her. Michael and Lily's story ripples beyond Anna's Haven, inspiring St. Augustine Medical Center to launch a citywide children's advocacy program. Lily, now 7, trains as a junior truth keeper, teaching kids to speak their truth. Michael establishes a foundation in Anna's name, funding hospital reforms to protect young patients. Henry Grayson leads volunteer workshops, sharing his investigative skills to spot deception. Families share stories of children's voices being heard, crediting Lily's courage. The garden blooms, a symbol of healing, as Michael and Lily plan a community event to spread their message.